Melody Meng's parents in China have been vaccinated with 2 shots of the widely used Sinopharm vaccine, but they still won't be allowed to enter Australia after border restrictions ease on February 21st. Key points. The largest group of international visitors to Australia pre-pandemic were from China. The largest group of international visitors to Australia pre-pandemic were from China. Not all vaccines being rolled out in China are recognised by Australian authorities for the purpose of travel. Not all vaccines being rolled out in China are recognised by Australian authorities for the purpose of travel. Strict Chinese quarantine arrangements and bilateral tensions could also deter many from booking flights to Australia. Australia's Therapeutic Goods Administration, TGA, has recognised Sinopharm as one of the vaccines for foreign travellers, but only if they are under the age of 60. This means Ms. Meng's elderly parents are not considered fully vaccinated and cannot enter Australia to visit their grandchildren in Melbourne. Every time my daughter has a video chat with her grandparents, she says, "I miss you so much, when can you come to Australia?" And my son has not even met his grandparents, Ms. Meng said. Melody Meng says COVID policies are making life difficult for those with family in China. Supplied. In China, the brand of vaccine you can get depends on the region you live in, so my parents do not have a choice. According to the World Health Organization, clinical trials of Sinopharm were not designed to demonstrate efficacy against severe disease in people with comorbidities or in the over 60s. However, Australia is the only country that considers over 60s vaccinated with Sinopharm to be unvaccinated for the purpose of travel. Like Ms. Meng, Janelle Yang has been separated from her parents for 2 years. They too are over 60 and have received 2 Sinopharm shots. Janelle Yang doesn't want to leave Australia, but says she may have to if she cannot be reunited with her parents. Supplied. I used to confidently tell my daughter that as Australia recovers from the pandemic, her grandparents will come back, but I cannot say that anymore, she said. Australia says it welcomes everyone who is fully vaccinated, but my parents are fully vaccinated, just with a vaccine not recognised in Australia, for reasons beyond their control. Ms. Yang said her parents could only receive a booster shot of Sinopharm because it was the vaccine they had already received. So it's a dead loop. There is no solution at all for our situation in China or Australia. We feel helpless. Only 2 Chinese carriers are currently flying to Australia, down from 9. Reuters, Lauren Elliott. Chinese visitors love Australian products. Pre-pandemic, the largest group of overseas visitors to Australia was from China, accounting for more than 15% of arrivals between July 2018 and June 2019. Chinese visitors were by far the biggest spenders too. They spent a total of $11.92 billion during that period, compared to $3.99 billion by American visitors and $2.05 billion by Japanese tourists. Chinese visitors are big spenders, and they love Australian products, said Crystal Zhong, a tourism expert at RMIT University. They take back a lot of Australian products, the vitamin products, the wine, all the other things. Crystal Zhong says the scenery and culture in Australia are appealing to Chinese tourists. Supplied. But strict border closures enforced by both Australia and China in response to COVID changed all that. By November 2021, Singapore, the UK and India were the main source countries for international visitors, according to the Australian Bureau of Statistics. Dr. Zhong said that pre-COVID, several Australian airlines and 9 Chinese carriers had operated direct flights between Sydney or Melbourne, and not only major cities like Beijing, Shanghai and Guangzhou, but also regional hubs like Lebanon and Qingdao. It was very exceptional to see an airline market between 2 countries accommodate more than 10 airlines, Dr. Zhong said. So that, again, is a showcase of the booming of the tourism market between Australia and China, but COVID has posed significant challenges, she said. Today, only 2 of the previous 9 Chinese carriers, China Southern and China Eastern, are operating flights to Australia. quarantine requirements, other considerations likely to deter travel. China is the only major nation that has continued to pursue a COVID-0 approach. Since COVID-19 was first detected in Wuhan 2 years ago, strict lockdowns, travel bans, mass testing and contact tracing have meant the virus has largely remained under control in the world's most populous country. China is still aggressively suppressing spread of the virus. AP, Andy Wong. Part of this tough approach includes wide-ranging border controls aimed at restricting who can enter or leave China, measures that have been further strengthened in response to the global spread of the Delta and Omicron variants. For example, the government has built a heavily fortified fence along the country's borders with Myanmar and Vietnam during the pandemic in an effort to prevent people bringing the virus into China. Its Civil Aviation Administration recently announced that only 408 international passenger flights would be allowed into China per week over the colder months between October 31, 2021 and the 26th of March 2022, a reduction from 644 in the summer. So while Chinese citizens can theoretically leave the country, there are significant practical barriers to doing so. On top of limited flight options, Chinese tourists may also be deterred from overseas holidays by lengthy quarantine periods upon return. After arriving in China, travelers must pay to enter quarantine at a hotel or government facility for 14 days. People leave a quarantine hotel in Dalian, China. Reuters, Thomas Peter File. In some parts of the country, this is followed by an additional 7 days of self-isolation. Dr. Zhong said quarantine would definitely be a barrier for the Chinese to think about visiting overseas destinations. But I don't think that would be long-term, she added. As we see this kind of light at the end of the tunnel of this pandemic, things will improve. Government policy is making our lives very difficult. Sydney woman Vivian Wu has been separated from her parents in China throughout the pandemic. She got her hopes up when Australia decided to include foreign-born parents as immediate family members for the purpose of exemptions to border regulations in October 2021. It is really good that the government, included parents to that immediate family exemption category last year. But in fact they are not treated equally, Ms. Wu said. Her parents have been immunized against COVID-19 with a full course of Zhifei Longcom, a vaccine not recognized by the TGA. China, Indonesia and Uzbekistan are the only countries to have approved Zhifei Longcom for use. I think there should be a differentiation between people who are not vaccinated at all and people who received full courses of a vaccine that's just not recognized in Australia, Ms. Wu said. Given the federal government considers them unvaccinated, Melody Meng intends to pay for her parents to arrive into Australia and go through hotel quarantine before being vaccinated with Pfizer. Melody Meng was last with her parents 2 years ago. Supplied. While her parents are willing to do expensive hotel quarantine at either end, Ms. Meng said hotel quarantine in China would likely deter many other potential visitors. China is the single biggest contributor to Australia's tourism industry, and also a big portion of Australia's migrant population, but the current government policy is making our lives very difficult, she said. Even for those who have had recognized vaccines, financial concerns might impact people's ability to travel overseas. The World Bank projects a slowdown of the Chinese economy in 2022, driven by what it calls a severe and prolonged downturn in the property sector and the broader impacts of COVID-19 on economic activity. Dr. Zhong also said ongoing political tensions between Canberra and Beijing could discourage Chinese tourists. Nevertheless, she said, the desire to come back to Australia, according to some of the research, is still very high. Australia's unique culture and landscape were draw cards for Chinese tourists, she said, adding that Chinese tourists would return eventually. For Janelle Yang, however, the ordeal of family separation may prove too much. My parents are elderly, and if there is no hope for a solution, we have to consider moving back to China permanently for reunion, she said. But this is not what we want. We've lived in Australia for a long time and our roots are here. Home Affairs and